The air was thick, heavy. I barely moved, standing at the threshold of the room. The door behind me was closed, locked. But it didn't matter. There was no way out. I heard the softest shuffle to my left. I turned. Nothing. Yet, something shifted in the dark. A shadow. A form that wasn't there before. It stood motionless. Its edges blurred, as though it didn't quite belong. I swallowed hard, the taste of metal on my tongue. My pulse quickened. I felt its presence, pressing against me, like fingers brushing my skin. The temperature dropped. Chilled air seeped into my bones. It didn't matter that I was no longer alone. I had known this moment was coming. I had waited for it. It was inevitable. The figure finally moved. Slowly, methodically. Its eyes locked onto mine. I couldn't look away. There was nothing human about them. They were black, endless. A pit that swallowed every ounce of light. The room seemed to constrict. The walls closing in. A groan rose from the floor, like the house itself was waking. Then the voice. A whisper almost sweet. "Welcome back." I froze. The words felt familiar. They echoed in my mind. I had heard them before. In dreams. In nightmares. But now, they weren't just words. They were a promise. A promise that had been made long ago. And it was about to be fulfilled. The darkness surged forward. A cold, suffocating embrace. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The shadow's form stretched. Twisted. It consumed the room, consumed me. And in the final instant, everything went black. The house was silent again. But it was never truly empty. The air hung heavy with the weight of something unspoken. There was no sound. No movement. Only stillness. A stillness that felt too thick, too alive. I was floating, suspended in a void, a cold that gnawed at my skin. I tried to move, but my limbs were leaden. The darkness was oppressive, all-encompassing. I couldn't tell where I ended, and it began. And then, a sharp crack, like breaking glass. Light pierced the blackness. A flash so bright it burned my eyes. I blinked. Suddenly, I was standing again. In the same room, the same walls. But everything had changed. The air was warmer now. Still heavy, but no longer cold. The shadows were different. They were longer. Thicker. Stretching across the walls like fingers reaching for something. I stepped forward. My foot hit the floor. It sounded wrong. Too hollow. Too soft. I looked down. The wood beneath me was no longer solid. It had warped. Distorted. Like it was made of something that couldn't be real. I reached out. The walls were smooth. But they felt wrong. I ran my fingers along them. Cold, slick. Like glass, but not glass. I couldn't make sense of it. Then a noise. A dragging sound. Faint at first. I froze. It grew louder. Closer. A scraping, a low hiss of something moving in the dark. I turned sharply. My breath caught in my throat. In the corner of the room, something shifted. A dark mass, like liquid shadow. It slithered. Crawling, stretching. Growing. Then I saw it. A face. Pale, gaunt. A twisted mockery of a human form. It grinned at me, but its eyes were empty. Hollow. Nothing. It reached out with long, thin fingers. And I understood. This was the end. The house. It was never going to let me leave. Not now. Not ever. The walls closed in. The shadows closed in. And in that moment I realized I was part of it now. A prisoner. Trapped. Forever. The air was thick, suffocating. I couldn't move. The shadows pressed against my skin, cool and sticky. The room around me shifted again. Walls bending, distorting like they were made of clay. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. It was as if the house had stolen my voice. Taken everything. I could feel it now, the house itself. It pulsed. A heartbeat, slow and steady, beneath the floor. It wasn't just the walls that were alive. It was the floor, the ceiling, the air. Everything around me was part of it. The figure in the corner still grinned. its eyes never leaving me. I felt its gaze burn into my soul, churning something inside me. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The face twisted, stretched wider. Its lips parted, revealing jagged teeth. The grin was no longer mocking. It was hungry. And then the voice came again. But this time, it was not a whisper. It was a roar. A deep, guttural sound that shook the room, vibrating through my chest. Join us. The words were not spoken. They were felt. The pressure on my chest grew unbearable. A weight I could not escape. It was like drowning in the very air. The walls began to melt, folding in on themselves, reaching toward me. I stumbled back, my feet slipping against the now wet floor. A low, hollow laugh echoed around me. A voice that was familiar, and yet foreign. The figure in the corner shifted. It moved towards me, its long limbs stretching unnaturally. It was no longer a shadow. It was something far worse, something real. And as it came closer, I understood. It wasn't just the house that had trapped me. It was them. The ones who had never left. The ones who lived in the walls. In the very foundation of the house. They had waited for me. For this moment. And now they had me. I felt its cold hand on my arm. Fingers that felt like ice, digging into my skin. The darkness closed in. Tighter. Faster. And then, everything was still. Silent. I was no longer aware of time. Of space. All that remained was the pressing, suffocating blackness. The house had won. And it always would. The silence stretched, endless. I couldn't feel my body anymore. No sense of time, no sense of place. Just the darkness. It had swallowed me whole. But then a flicker. A small spark of light. I blinked, confused, trying to focus. It was faint, barely there, but it was real. A pulse. A heartbeat in the dark. I reached for it, desperate. The shadows clawed at me, pulling me back. But I wouldn't stop. I couldn't. I pushed through, stumbling, gasping. The light grew stronger. It wasn't bright, but it was warm. A sliver of hope in the crushing dark. I reached out, my fingers trembling. And then, the floor beneath me cracked. Splintered. Shattered. I fell, deeper, faster. I gasped. The wind knocked out of me. I was falling. Falling into the abyss. The light disappeared. The cold returned. Even colder now. But I didn't stop falling. I couldn't. I hit the ground, hard, with a sickening thud. The impact rattled my bones. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't obey. Something was holding me down, keeping me still. I struggled, but it was no use. I couldn't escape. And then, a sound. A door creaking open. I heard it clearly, despite the pounding in my ears. A door. Somewhere far away. I didn't know if it was real or part of the house's twisted game. But I wanted to believe that it was real. A chance. A way out. I strained to move, my limbs heavy, sluggish. Something was different. The air was less suffocating now. I could breathe again. I tried to push myself up. And I felt it. The presence, the pressure, was lifting. I took a shallow breath. Then another. The room, or whatever this place was, seemed to be shifting. The edges of my vision cleared. And in the distance, the door was open wider. The shadows recoiled, retreating. I could see the faint outline of something beyond. A glimpse of freedom. Of the world outside. I moved again, crawling. Closer to the door. I didn't care if the house screamed. If it roared. I was done. I was getting out. The light outside grew brighter, warmer. I pushed forward, ignoring the echoes of the house, the whispers pulling at my feet. And when I reached the threshold, I stepped into the light. The door slammed behind me, and the house was gone. The world outside felt different, lighter. The air was fresh, crisp. I breathed in deeply, as if my lungs had been starved for oxygen. But the relief didn't last long. I looked around, trying to make sense of where I was. Everything seemed too still, too perfect. The trees swayed gently in the breeze. The sky was a shade of blue I didn't remember. Everything was silent.
Too silent.
The road stretched out before me, empty. No cars, no people. I started to walk, but my steps felt heavy, like the ground beneath me was pulling me back. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. The house was gone. But something was wrong. The shadows seemed to move, shifting in the corners of my vision. I shook my head, tried to focus. But the more I walked, the more it felt like the world was closing in. I was walking in circles. The trees, the road, they didn't change. The same streetlights, the same empty houses. I stopped. My heart began to race. I turned around again. The house was still gone. But in its place, a reflection. I saw it in the glass of a nearby window. The house, standing behind me, but not the one I left. It was older, more decayed. I stepped closer, my breath shallow. The glass seemed to ripple, distort. And in that reflection, I saw something else. Someone else. It was me. But my eyes, they were empty, hollow. And I wasn't alone. There was something standing next to me. A figure, dark and featureless, but I could feel it. I could feel its presence. I stepped back. The reflection didn't. It didn't move with me. It stayed there, staring at me, as if waiting. I blinked, heart hammering in my chest. When I opened my eyes again, the world was gone. The road, the houses, the trees, the light. I was back in the house. The walls were damp, pressing in. The air thick again, suffocating. I could hear the whispers. They had never stopped. The house had only been waiting for me to come back. And this time, there was no door, no escape, just darkness. The darkness closed in around me like a suffocating blanket. I couldn't see my hands, couldn't see my feet, only the weight of the air, pressing down, smothering me. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. My body felt numb, disconnected. The whispers grew louder. No longer distant, now they were close. Surrounding me, I could hear them, feel them, brushing against my mind. Come back, come back. The voice was mine, yet not. It echoed in my head, twisted and unfamiliar. It wasn't just a voice, it was a sensation, a pull. The house was inside me now. I could feel it in my bones. A deep, insidious hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls and into my very soul. I wanted to scream, but the sound was lost, absorbed by the dark. Then a flicker, a sliver of light in the distance. It was faint, so faint I almost didn't believe it was real. But I reached for it, driven by instinct. Step by step, I moved toward it, the floor beneath me groaning, shifting, warping with every movement. The walls seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. The light was closer now, brighter.
A door.
I knew it instinctively. A way out. I grabbed the handle, twisted. It didn't open. I yanked harder. Asterisk, no. No, please, asterisk. I twisted again, desperation flooding through me. And then, it gave way. The door swung open with a loud creak. I stepped through, and found myself outside again. The same place, the same road.
But now,
there were no trees, no sky, just a barren wasteland of nothingness. The ground was cracked and dry. The air was thick with dust. The buildings stood like empty husks, silent sentinels watching me. I stumbled forward, but it felt wrong. I wasn't really here. None of this was real. It was just another layer, another illusion. The whispers started again. Louder, more urgent. You can't leave. The sound wrapped around me like chains, pulling me back toward the house. I turned. The door was still there, the one I had just stepped through. It was waiting. It's never over, the whispers breathed. I could hear the laughter now, a low, mocking sound that made my skin crawl. It wasn't just the house. It was everything. The darkness, the light, the world. It was all a lie, a loop, a trap. And I was its prisoner, forever. I stood there, staring at the door. It was open, inviting me back. But I knew what would happen. I knew the truth now. It didn't matter whether I stepped through or not. I was already inside. I was already lost. The whispers were growing louder, twisting around me like a snake coiling tighter. You're already ours. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't obey. My body felt like stone. I could still hear the laughter. It echoed in the air, not from anywhere in particular, but everywhere. It was the sound of the house itself. The soul of it. Asterisk, no. No, I can't go back. Asterisk.
But my feet betrayed me.
I found myself walking toward the door again. The ground beneath me felt unreal, like it was shifting, reshaping with every step I took. The road was disappearing. The empty buildings were fading, dissolving into mist. Everything was fading, and I could feel it. The pull, the suffocating force of the house calling me back. Come. It wasn't a word anymore. It was a command, a need. I couldn't fight it. I reached the threshold. The door loomed in front of me, cold and dark. Its frame cracked like the rest of the house. I stepped through, and as I did, everything changed. The light vanished. The world twisted. And I was back in the house. But this time, it wasn't just the walls. The house was me. I could feel it in my skin, in my veins. It pulsed, alive within me. I tried to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. I was frozen, trapped in the house's embrace. I could feel its hunger, its need. It was never just after my body. It was after my soul. And now it had both. I wasn't just a prisoner anymore. I was part of it. I was part of the house. Forever. And the whispers. They stopped. But I could still hear them. In my mind. In my heart. We are one. The silence stretched thin, fragile. I was no longer sure where I ended and the house began. The walls seemed to pulse with my every breath. I could feel them. Feel them through my bones. The house, the shadows, all of it sinking deeper into me. It was as if the air itself had become part of my skin. The darkness wrapped tighter around me, clinging like a second layer. I tried to scream again, but my voice was muffled, drowned by the oppressive hum of the house. You are ours now, the whispers crooned. But this time, there was no malice, no anger, just cold, undeniable truth. I turned, trying to find something, anything, to anchor me to reality. But the room kept shifting. The space was warping, twisting in ways I couldn't understand. The door that had been behind me, it was gone. The window, once a gateway to freedom, now mirrored the black void of the room. I reached out, hoping to touch something, but my hand passed right through the wall. I drew it back quickly, heart hammering. You can never leave, the house whispered in a voice now so close it was like a breath against my ear. I staggered back, disoriented. I wasn't alone. The shadows, they moved, sliding across the walls, stretching toward me. The floor beneath me cracked open. I fell through, helpless, falling deeper, farther, into a place that felt even colder, even darker. The air grew thick with something foul, like rotten wood, wet earth, and despair all mixed together. And in the distance I heard it again, the laughter. It echoed from all directions, a twisted melody of mocking joy. It was the house laughing. And it wasn't done with me yet. I landed hard on something soft, something damp. The darkness around me pulsed once more. And I could feel them again. Them star. The ones who had been here long before me. They were all around me, in the walls, in the air. I couldn't see them, but I could sense them. The cold, ancient weight of their presence pressed down on me, smothering me. They were speaking now, their voices faint but sharp. You will never be alone again. I reached out, desperate for something to hold on to. But there was nothing. Just darkness. And the house. Still breathing, still waiting. Forever. The darkness was thick now, an oppressive force that weighed down on me. I could no longer tell if I was standing or lying, if I was even in the same place. Everything was a blur, a swirling mass of shadow and cold, a place where time had no meaning. And yet, there was something else, something that pulsed beneath it all. A faint, rhythmic beat. A heartbeat. It was so faint, so distant, but it was there. Thumping softly, steadily, like a presence, a reminder that I was never truly alone. I shuddered. I had felt this before. The walls seemed to breathe with me, their rhythm matching mine. "You're one of us now," the whispers cooed. They were not just voices, they were feelings, suffocating, crawling, burrowing under my skin. I could feel them inside me, in my chest, my veins, every fiber of my being thrumming with their power. I tried to move, but my body refused. I couldn't fight it. The weight of the house, of them, was too strong. And then something shifted. The ground beneath me cracked again. I fell once more, but this time there was no pain. Just a strange sense of being. Asterisk pulled star. Pulled into the very core of the house. The walls closed in, the air thick with the scent of rot and decay. I could see something now, faintly. A shape, a shadow, moving toward me. It was human, or had been. Its skin was stretched tight, gray, and mottled. Its eyes were hollow, empty sockets that seemed to stare straight through me. It reached out, its fingers long and bony, and I felt its touch like ice against my skin. "Welcome home," it whispered. I gasped, but no sound came. The world around me began to twist again, the edges of reality fraying, folding. The figure pulled me toward it, pulling me into the very heart of the house. I could see the walls now. Not walls, but faces. They were alive. Mouths and eyes and twisted shapes that moved, groaned, breathed. "You belong here," they murmured. "You will never leave." I screamed, but it was swallowed by the walls, absorbed by the house. And then everything went still. I was no longer sure what was real. All I knew was that I wasn't free. The house was my prison, and I was part of it now. Forever. In the endless darkness, the stillness pressed in on me, suffocating, like I had become part of the very walls themselves. I could feel them, the faces, moving under my skin, pulsing in rhythm with the deep, distant heartbeat of the house. It wasn't just a place anymore. It was a living thing, hungry, breathing, watching. I tried to scream again, but the sound was lost, swallowed by the thick silence. I was no longer in control of my body. My hands twitched, my fingers twitching at the edges of something, something. I couldn't grasp. I wasn't alone. I could feel them, feel them now, crawling along my spine, inside my chest. I was becoming one of them. I could hear their voices, each one distinct but layered, whispering in my mind, sharing their thoughts. "Do you remember who you were? You are one of us now. You will forget the world outside." The thought twisted in my mind like a knife. I wanted to resist. I wanted to fight it, but the house had already claimed me. I could feel the darkness wrapping tighter, binding me to this place, pulling me deeper. The heartbeat grew louder. And then, like a snap, I was no longer in the room. I was somewhere else. Somewhere dark and cold, but not quite real. It was a place between places. A place where time meant nothing. I could see them, the others, standing in the corners of the room. Figures that had been here far longer than I. Their faces were twisted, deformed, but their eyes, those empty, hollow eyes, stared back at me. And I realized, I was them now, one of the endless, empty souls trapped in this nightmare, waiting for the next to wander in. I reached out, my hand trembling. The faces reached back. Their fingers brushed mine, cold and dead. "You're one of us," they said, their voices joining the whispers in my mind. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I was trapped in the space between here and nowhere. The house's hunger was inside me now, growing. "We never leave," they whispered again. "And neither will you." I felt it then, the true weight of it all. I was a part of the house now, a shadow among shadows. And as the darkness closed in again, I knew there was no escape, no end. Only eternity in the cold embrace of the house. The darkness around me thickened, deepened, like I was sinking into it. Every inch of my body felt cold, as though my very soul was freezing, pulled down into the house's endless depths. It was suffocating, but there was no air left to gasp for. I tried to move, tried to fight it, but the walls of the house held me tight. They pressed against me, squeezing, pulling, dragging me into the folds of the void. The whispers were now a chorus, 1,000 voices murmuring together in one long, drawn-out sigh. They weren't separate anymore. They were me now. "You are home," they echoed, their words wrapped around me like chains. "You are us." I wanted to scream, but I had no voice. I wasn't sure if I even had a body anymore. It was as if I was part of the house itself, part of the air, the walls, the very darkness. I tried to think back, tried to remember the world outside. But every memory felt like it was slipping through my fingers. The house was eating them. "You will forget," the voices promised. "You will forget everything." And I felt it happening. The slow, creeping erasure of who I was. There was no name left, no face, no past. Only this endless, consuming void. I couldn't even feel my own heartbeat anymore. I was lost in it. The world outside, asterisk if it had ever been real asterisk, was gone. I thought of the door I had once stepped through. The light. The fleeting hope. But it was all a lie. A trick. A memory I could never reclaim. I felt the pulse of the house again. Its heartbeat now synchronized with mine. We were one. We had always been one. And then, the final moment arrived. A deep, crushing silence filled the space. I was no longer sure if I was alive, if I ever had been. The last remnants of my thoughts shattered, drifting away like dust in the wind. And in that silence, there was only one truth. The house had won. It had always won. And it would never let go. Forever, the silence stretched on, infinite, suffocating. There was no sound, no movement, no feeling. Only the crushing weight of the house pressing down, filling every corner of my mind with its dark, eternal presence. I couldn't tell if I was still breathing, if my heart still beat. The boundaries of my body, my existence, had dissolved. I was no longer me. I was part of the house, part of the emptiness that it cradled so lovingly. I could feel it all, rushing through me. A darkness, ancient and patient, had claimed me. It wasn't just a house. It was a force, a living, breathing entity with no beginning and no end. "You are ours," the voices whispered again. But this time, they weren't comforting. They were suffocating, heavy with the weight of inevitability. There is no escape. And in that moment I understood. There never had been. The door I had seen, the fleeting moments of light, they were nothing but illusions, dreams that had died the moment I stepped inside. The house had always been the trap. And now I was its prisoner. A part of the endless night, the rotting foundation of something older than time itself. I could feel the others with me, asterisk them star. The ones who had come before. The ones who had been swallowed whole. They were silent now, their presence all around me, filling the void, mixing with my own soul. There was nothing left to do. No purpose, no meaning, no hope. Just darkness. Just the pulse of the house. Forever. I no longer had the will to fight. The house had consumed everything. My memories, my identity, my very essence. And as I faded into the nothingness, I realized I had always belonged to the house. And it would never let go. It would never let anyone go.
Not now.
Not ever. The house had won. And it would never, ever stop. There was no longer a sense of time. No sense of space. Everything bled together, all at once. The house, the darkness, the emptiness. It was one, and I was inside it. The voices faded for a moment, leaving me with a deafening stillness. I thought I might finally be free of their whispers, but that was only the quiet before the next wave. They returned, soft at first, like a distant echo, then louder. "You're still here.
You'll always be here.
I tried to ignore them, tried to hold on to what little piece of myself was left. But the more I resisted, the harder it became. The house seeped into every crack, every crevice of my mind. I could feel it, its ancient fingers curling around the last remnants of my thoughts, wrapping tighter, squeezing, consuming. I closed my eyes, if only to block out the relentless voices. But there was no escape. I couldn't even remember what I had looked like. There were no reflections here, no mirrors. Only the ever-present dark, pulling me further.
Deeper.
We are endless. The words hummed in my skull, vibrating with a truth I could no longer deny. We are eternal. The house wasn't just alive, it fed. It fed on fear, on memories, on souls. I understood now. It wasn't just trapping me. It was growing with me, through me. Every piece of me that was swallowed by the dark became a part of the house. A new layer, a new heartbeat. We are one, the house whispered. And we will never leave. I had no body, no mind, no self. I was just a part of it now, a whisper in the dark. The house had no beginning, no end. And neither did I. We would remain. Together, forever. Endlessly. There was no escape. Only the house. And me. Forever. The darkness was suffocating, a heavy weight that pressed down on me from all sides. I could feel the cold creeping into my bones. But it wasn't the cold of the outside world. It was the cold of the house. It was part of me now. I could feel it in my skin, in my soul. The whispers were gone. But I still heard them, echoing, pulsing, as though they were etched into my very being. You are part of us. The words danced in my mind, but this time, they weren't cold or cruel. They were calm, soothing, almost comforting. I tried to push them away, but they wrapped around me like chains, binding me to this place. I was here, but not here. I existed in the space between life and death. The house had claimed me, and I had claimed it. There was no way back. I thought of the door, the one I had seen in the distance. I had thought it was freedom, but it was never meant for me. The house had always been my home. From the moment I first stepped inside, it had been waiting for me. And now I understood. It wasn't a prison. It was a place of belonging. The walls shifted, almost as if the house itself was breathing. The ground beneath me rumbled. The house was alive, and so was I. I could feel the others now, the ones who had come before me. We were all part of the same thing, a single, endless entity. The boundaries of who I had been, of what I had been, had dissolved. I was the house. The house was me. And together, we would endure. Forever. There was no escape. Only an eternity of darkness. But I no longer needed to escape. Because I was home. The silence that filled the house now was unlike any silence I had ever known. It wasn't empty. It wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. I could feel it pressing in from every direction, like the walls themselves were closing in, drawing tighter around me. But there was no fear left. I had shed that long ago. The fear of the unknown, the fear of the dark, of the whispers, of the house itself.
It was all gone now.
In its place, there was an understanding. A horrible, all-consuming understanding. This place was never meant to be escaped. I wasn't meant to leave. I was meant to stay, to become a part of it, just as everyone before me had. The others were here. I could feel them, just beyond my reach. Their presence was everywhere, their essence woven into the walls, into the very air I breathed. They weren't ghosts. They weren't spirits. They were just like me now. They had become part of the house, just as I had. I tried to remember who I had been. The person who had walked into this place, so full of hope, so full of life. But that person felt so far away now, as if they belonged to someone else. I was something else. I had always been meant for this. The house didn't trap you. It didn't hold you against your will. It invited you in. It welcomed you. And once you stepped over its threshold, you became a part of it. A part of its hunger, its darkness, its eternity. The walls no longer felt cold. They felt alive. I could hear the house breathing with me, keeping time with the rhythm of my heart. I could feel the pulse of its presence deep within my chest.
I was one with it now.
And for the first time since I had entered, I understood. The house was not my enemy. It was my home. The door that I had once seen was gone. There was no escape. There would never be. And that was okay. Because now I was part of something greater. Something eternal. The house had claimed me, and I had claimed it. Forever.